Hey, what's going on? I thought it would be interesting if I made a quick tutorial. Maybe this is going to be quick. I know this is very unprompted, very unscripted. But I thought it'd be interesting if I made a tutorial about some techniques or design sort of guidelines to follow when making sounds that are more physically oriented, or when following a sound design aesthetic that focuses on sounds that are guided by more physical principles. So this wouldn't necessarily apply, although you could apply it to. This wouldn't necessarily apply to like a lot of bass design or a lot of other types of more weird sound design. This is more sound design specifically targeted at making sounds that are physically oriented, or sounds that could have that characteristic applied to them. So first, I think it would be just helpful if I played a sound that does follow that sort of design aesthetic, and then I can talk in a little bit more detail about what exactly is going on and what my thought process is, and how you can apply that. So I'm going to play it. This is what it sounds like. There you go. So what exactly is happening here? I'm not going to reveal all the details at first because I don't really want to overwhelm you with information. I'm going to try to frame this in a way that's digestible, because there's a lot of information that I want to talk about. But anyway, what exactly is happening here? Well, this sounds, to me, if I was going to put myself in a position of like some objective listener, sounds like sort of like a plucked string, but it also sounds metallic somehow, but is very obviously decaying in a physical way. Yeah. Okay, I described the sound for like 2 minutes here. You don't need to see all that. The point is, I was trying to demonstrate how describing a sound and trying to notice what it's doing sonically is a very useful tool when you're doing sound design stuff. All right, so I think it's important to actually define what I mean by physical in a more discrete way. By physical, I mean a sound that shares characteristics with or gives the general sonic appearance of something that is or could have been produced physically in the real world without the use of digital technology. Okay, well, what characteristics do just normal sounds that exist in the physical world have? Okay, well, they all have in common a wave or sort of fluctuation that's traveling through a medium. And by this, I mean sound waves. That's a really dumb, gay way of saying sound waves. Okay. Well, more specifically, what is a sound wave? Well, that's, like I said before, that is a fluctuation in air pressure or just pressure in general that travels through a solid, liquid, or gaseous medium. Generally, it's going to be a solid or a gaseous one, because, I mean, I like sound like the acoustics of underwater. Cut that out. That's completely unnecessary. But okay, so what characteristics does a sound traveling in a medium have? Well, it's going to reflect off of things. It's going to disperse. It's going to resonate with things. Okay, well, how do you find resonances? How do you find dispersion? How do you take care of all these things? Okay, this is getting too complicated. I'm going to focus in on a very, very simple concept in physics. So this software here is AlgoDo, and I'm going to use this to demonstrate something that I'll apply later. Okay, so give me a moment to design a thingy. Okay, so here I have some ball, and this is the ground, and I'm going to play the simulation. And wow, would you look at that? The ball bounces, and then eventually it's going to stop bouncing, and it's going to settle. So this is an example of exponential decay, right? So if I pull up a graph of the motion of the ball and then play the simulation again, so if you follow the peaks of this decay, right, this looks very similar to what an exponentially decaying curve looks like. So if I open up Desmos, a graphing calculator software, right, then exponential decay can be graphed out using this function. Right? This is an exponentially decaying curve. and if I scale it accurately, then it looks, this type of decay looks very similar to the way that this is decaying. Maybe if I spread it out a little bit. Yeah, it's like pretty similar. And any system in the real world with physics applied to it will decay in this way. They're going to decay exponentially. And of course, this applies to acoustic systems, right? If you have a sound that's vibrating in a string or in a beam or in a space in a resonant chamber, anything like that, that sound is going to decay in this inverse exponential way. All right, so let's get a little bit more technical with things. I'm going to go back into the software here, right? And instead of a ball bouncing, I'm going to use a mass that's like moving up and down, suspended by a spring. And I'm going to make that really quick. All right, so I've got this simulation set up. I'm going to play it. So this is the Y position with respect to time. And you'll notice here it's following the same sort of exponential decay. But it's also, right now, it's resonating with a frequency, right? And this frequency can be calculated. I'm not going to do that right now. But there is a consistent frequency that's happening here. And we can change certain properties of the simulation, which I'll do right now, to change the amount of time that it decays in the actual value of the frequency, like this. So there you go. So now it's decaying in a different way. It's resonating with a different frequency because I changed properties of the spring. And this is a little bit closer to how sound would be modeled physically because of the fact that it's resonating with a frequency, right? So like if I play the simulation and then I drag the ball around a little bit, right? Then whatever I do to it, it's always sort of going to default back to moving up and down at that specific frequency. Like no matter what I do, it's always sort of going to move around with that frequency. Even if there's other harmonics, then it's going to do that mostly with that same frequency, just because the properties of the spring are like that. The properties of the spring dictate that the ball is going to resonate up and down with that frequency. And this is very, very similar to how acoustic systems work, right? Like if you blow into a cup or something like that, when you blow into a cup, then it's always going to resonate with a specific frequency, right? The movement of the air back and forth in the cup, no matter what you do to it, you're always sort of going to come back to that main resonant frequency because that's just how the cup is structured. Okay, so let's bring this a little bit closer to actual like sound design, because I imagine this is not very interesting to a lot of people. So back in Ableton, yay, an interface that we understand. So next, I want to try to analyze some physically produced audio. Okay, so here I have, let me do the full camera. This is a kalimba. So let's record the kalimba into Ableton. Okay, so we have that. And if we take a look at the waveform here, I turn it up a bit. I think it was clipping a little bit towards the beginning. That's fine. It looks to me like it's decaying in a very, it's decaying in a way that's very similar to an inverse exponential decay. Now, of course, because this is a real thing, the decay isn't always going to be exactly according to an inverse exponential curve because there's, source of interference, there's other physical factors. Maybe I was moving it up and down, which caused it to vibrate in a different way, or maybe I breathed on it, or maybe the weather off in China caused some weird thing to happen. I don't know. But the point is, it's pretty goddamn close to an inverse exponential decay. And also, if we look at the frequency that it's resonating with, this seems to be the fundamental, like that. It's resonating with that frequency throughout. But there's also higher harmonics, which of course are going to be multiples of the fundamental. But if you also look a little bit closer, then the amplitude of the harmonics seem to decrease as the sound decays more. So, right? So here, like the harmonics are a lot louder compared to the fundamental. Whereas here the harmonics seem to be a little bit quieter. And especially at the fundamental. Like at the fundamental, especially for the first two periods, like you're barely getting any fundamental in comparison to how many harmonics there are. And here as well, there's a lot of much higher harmonics, which you can see in these waves, which have a much shorter period in comparison to the fundamental. And those much higher oscillations die down and sort of give way to this other shorter one. And that eventually dies down as well. So it's not only the fundamental that decays, but it's also the higher harmonics. And the higher harmonics always will decay faster than the fundamental frequency in these kinds of sounds. Let's analyze another thing. How about a sound of me like doing that, like, you know, when you flick this out of your mouth and you have your mouth open, it'll like make a little plucky kind of sound. Let's record that in. Okay. So here's our sound. And we can see that if I turn it up again, it will once again follow those general properties where, in this really low frequency, by the way, that's the hum of my computer. So I've been ignoring that. But in general, right, it has a lot of higher harmonics up here at the beginning, and those eventually decay out and make way for the fundamental. You can also analyze this in a spectrogram, but I'm not going to do that. Actually, you know, fuck it. Why not? I'm gonna analyze the kalimba in a spectrogram. Right. Yeah. So if we look at this, this is the sound of the kalimba. I can play here. At the beginning, you can see there's a lot more higher harmonics up there, right? And then eventually, as it continues to decay, it's going to make way for just the fundamental frequency as time continues. And then that too is eventually going to decay out. Which is really cool. But yeah, there you go. That's a property of sound. So now I want to talk about how this is actually modeled. And how generally it's modeled. There's two ways that I want to talk about. Both those two ways are waveguide synthesis and modal synthesis. I'm going to talk about waveguide synthesis first. Okay, so imagine a sound that is traveling through a string, right? That sound is moving in a medium, right? And a sound moving in a medium can be abstracted as a delay in time, right? Because it takes time for the sound to go from one place to another. And because it's moving back and forth in a string, right? Then you can abstract that even further to being a series of consecutive delays that are all of the same amount of time. But also, right, as the sound continues to move back and forth in the string, it's losing energy, right? It's losing energy in this inverse exponential way, right? So, okay, but we can only really know what the sound is doing in between the delays, because you can't really affect a sound in between a delay. So if we can only change the sound in between two delays, then we have to sort of think about it as if the sound is traveling through the string and then hits the end of the string, and then stuff happens to the sound. And then it travels back in the string and then hits the end of the string, and then stuff happens to the sound again, and that continues. So what is happening to the sound to cause it to decay in that way? Well, it's both losing high-end frequency content and becoming quieter. So how can you simulate something that's losing high-end content and becoming quieter? Well, you can multiply it by a value that's less than 1 and greater than 0, right? Which is going to cause it to decay in that inverse exponential way. And you can apply a low-pass filter, which is going to simulate the decay of higher harmonics faster than the decay of lower harmonics. And it just turns out that Ableton has a built-in plugin, well, multiple actually. But I'm going to use echo for this. So let's take operator to just simulate the initial sound that's going to the string. Like this is just going to be the plucking sound. And you can sort of model that as just a noise click. So let's just take a noise click, which sounds like this. Whoa, wow, what a fantastic sound. And then if we put this into a delay, right? So remember, each delay is simulating the sound traveling through the string, right? And then after each delay, you make it a little bit quieter and you apply a little bit of a low pass filter, right? And that's exactly how echo works, right? So if you apply a low pass filter in between each delay, which is what this is doing, and you also make it quieter, which is what the feedback is doing, then it sounds like this. I should probably turn off ping pong. Right, you notice the sound becoming quieter and it's also getting lower frequencies. Like that. But this doesn't really sound like a pitch. It doesn't sound like a tone. It doesn't sound like you're actually hitting something. And all you have to do to make it sound like a pitch is to just decrease the decay time. Because of course, things that are in audio rate that have a perceptible frequency, the period of that sound is going to be less than 20 milliseconds. So, oh my God, listen to that. It's a tone that's decaying in an inverse exponential way, has a perceptible frequency that has higher harmonics that decay faster than lower harmonics. Wow. And of course, because we're using echo for this, we can't really change the pitch in a very good way, but that's pretty cool. And I can also adjust it, right? So if I wanted this to be an actual like true impulse, then I could do other stuff. But that's generally it. Actually, you know, I kind of want to analyze the sound, just to sort of prove my point here with the graph. So let's do that. I'm going to put an EQ before it because the frequency spectrum of this noise isn't flat. I'm gonna apply a little bit of a flat tilt just to get the lower frequencies to be better. That sounds a little bit nicer. So let's render this out actually. Okay, here's our sound. So, okay, let's take a look. It looks like at first, it's very rich in higher harmonics, right? And then the fundamental frequency stays present throughout, but the lower harmonics of that sort of die down, right? Like in these, over here, you have a lot more higher harmonics, a lot richer in harmonics. And then as it continues, you're getting more and more of that fundamental frequency, like that. Pretty incredible. There you go. And my noise impulse was a little bit too short, but that's okay. So this here is practically waveguide synthesis. Waveguide synthesis is enormously complex, and I don't really fully understand a lot of it, but this is a general guideline of what waveguide synthesis is. Specifically, this is carpless strong synthesis. That's what that is. Anyway, that's what waveguide synthesis is, and I can sort of demonstrate a way that I used it in this track, right? So UVI Falcon has a pretty solid carpless strong synthesis engine built into it. And I pretty blatantly stole the architecture of this patch from my friend Zora, who I'll link in the description. But it's a pretty good demonstration because I think it sounds quite nice. I think I also made this pluck with it. So yeah, both of those sound pretty physical. Yeah, so that's what waveguide synthesis is. Yeah, next I want to go into modal synthesis. Resonant filters have a specific property where the resonance will take longer to decay than the rest of the filter. So if I open up auto filter and pull out just the bandpass filter in auto filter and turn the resonance up, because the filters inside of auto filter, I believe, I'm not 100% sure, but because they're infinite impulse response filters, they're going to decay in that way. So if I just take like an impulse, okay, so this is just a transient of a kick that I made. Oh, whoops. It sounds like this. It's a very short click. But if I feed that into the auto filter with the resonance increased, my God. Is that an inverse exponential decay? Let's see. By golly, it is. Would you look at that? How amazing. Inverse exponential decay we're getting from a filter with high resonance. How beautiful. That's just so amazing. Well, what does this have to do with anything? Well, a lot. I wouldn't be talking about it if it didn't have a lot to do with everything. So what you might notice, though, is that there aren't any higher harmonics that are decaying, which was the case with waveguide synthesis, right? With this, it's just a single frequency that's decaying. So if you want higher harmonics, then you're probably going to want multiple bandpass filters, right? You're going to want one for each different harmonic. So let's do this. Let's undo a bunch, go back to our original sound, and we'll make a bunch of bandpass filters and try and line them up in a way where they would be harmonics, meaning that they're exact. The frequencies of each consecutive filter is a multiple of the fundamental. Okay, so these should be the first 8 harmonics. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yep. Okay, so these are the first 8 harmonics. So if we play the sound again. I should probably turn them down because that's quite loud. That's sounding pretty goddamn physical, right? Okay, so let's freeze it again. Oh my gosh. Would you look at that? Is that a sound that has a lot of high harmonics in the beginning that eventually decay out to just the fundamental frequency in an inverse exponential way? Holy shit. Just like I predicted. And there you go. That's modal synthesis right there. Modal synthesis is simulating each harmonic of a sound with a different bandpass filter. And I fucking love modal synthesis. It is, I love it so much. Because it sounds so pretty. This doesn't sound remarkably pretty, but holy shit, the sounds that you can make with modal synthesis are just heavenly. So like, for example, okay, let's see, what's something I made with modal synthesis? Oh my God, hi, editing me again. In this part of the video, I wanted to go through the project file and like give some examples of modal synthesis, but there aren't very good examples. So I'm just gonna play a few audio files in the video, and you're just gonna see like blackness or some other like image or something, I don't know. Enjoy that. Holy shit, modal synthesis is just the best. Because okay, so let's go into an M Sound Factory patch, because M Sound Factory has a dedicated modal synthesis engine called its modal filter, right? So each one of these rows here in this modal filter represents a different bandpass filter. So the number here indicates the harmonic. This is the volume. Whatever. I don't need to say this. It's pretty obvious on the interface, but you can use this to, simulate sounds, which is what I'm doing here. And it sounds so good. I love the sound of modal synthesis. Okay, so what's an accessible modal synthesis engine? Well, Ableton has a default one built in, and actually 2. They use the same engine. Collision and Corpus are both modal thingies. Collision is a synth because you're synthesizing it in impulse, and then you're sending that through a modal filter. Or modal filter, by the way, referring to just a series of parallel bandpass filters. You also have Corpus, which is just the filter itself, which is so cool, right? Like in this sound that I was showing before, I can navigate to it again. This guy here, nope, not that guy. This guy. If you look at it on a spectrogram, it's kind of difficult to see, but you can. If I put this, if I just turn the delay off, then you can see the fundamental frequency is taking a lot longer to decay than the other harmonics, right? Like all the other harmonics decay a lot faster than the fundamental frequency, which is a pretty strong indicator of modal synthesis. And also, I just know that collision is modal, but just for the viewer's sake. This is modal synthesis, and it sounds amazing. So waveguide synthesis and modal synthesis are two very good ways to get physical sounds. I also want to talk about a few other details with physical sound, because it's not just the production of sound itself. It also has a lot to do with the way that a sound is being represented in a space. Right? Like, if you're making a sound, then it's not going to, most of the time, it's not going to be exactly in front of you, right? Like, if you're in a room and you're listening to someone, then, like, you're not going to be looking directly at them for most of the time. Maybe you're going to be, like, maybe off to the side of them, or maybe the sound is coming from behind you, or it's going to be offset from your ears in a specific way. And you're also going to be hearing the resonance of the room itself, right? You're going to be hearing mostly the early reflections, but also the time that it takes the sound to travel to your ear, and also the late reflections of the reverb. Hi, editing me again. I rambled about this for like 3 minutes. It's not important, but I don't even know how much of it is true. Just cut to the chase. Here you go. Your brain will perceive the sound of the room as the sound itself, is what I'm saying, right? So if you make it sound like the sound is in a room by adding reverb or by adding like really early reflections, then you can sort of do that. So I have this acid bass here. Yeah. Which sounds like this. It's just a fill. It's not a very important element in the song, but it sounds not as synthesized as an acid bass. Like, obviously, okay, well, fucking yeah, that's an acid bass. But I'm putting M Turbo Reverb on it, which has this early reflections mode, which allows you to place the position, amplitude, and panning of each individual reflection in a room, or in a hypothetical room, right? Like, if you're in a room and you produce a sound, then the sound waves from that are going to travel all throughout the room and bounce off of the room in different ways and then come back to your ear. And that's going to take a very short amount of time before it starts decaying, right? Like, you're going to hit it, and then you're going to get the initial reflections from that sound bouncing and then coming immediately back to your ears. Those are early reflections, right? They usually take no longer than like half a second, a quarter of a second, and they are generally in reverbs that are modeled with just like a bunch of parallel delays. Anyway, I'm going off track here. If you simulate the early reflections of a room, then you can sometimes, depending on the sound source, get it to sound a little bit more physical, right? Like, if I turn the reverb off on this and I just play it. And then compared to what it sounds like with the reverb on it. It sounds a little bit more in place, because all these other sounds are very physical. I mean, obviously, like, you got a violin, there's a, what is this? There's a bunch of other like physical sounds. You get a guitar, this other piano thing from before. This is a very physical track. So if you just have like a randomly synthesized thing, it kind of sounds out of place. So putting a reverb on it to simulate the early reflections of a room would mitigate that. Mitigate? That's not a word. Mitigate. Medicate. I don't know. You know what I mean. What else is there? Panning. I was talking about that a little bit before, but panning is a really important thing for me. So like with these, I have these layered strings here, which sound like this. And each different instrument is panned differently, right? Like if I pan all of these into the center, like this, even if I pan the whole group a little bit, no, I don't like that very much. It sounds a lot more synthetic than this. It sounds like you're actually like immersed in a chamber ensemble, you know, because like chamber music, or at least a string. This is a cello quintet, but let's see. Let's look up cello quintet on Google Images just to demonstrate. Cello quintet. There you go. So this is a cello quintet. They're all playing, 5 people playing cellos. They're all spaced differently. You got a guy in the center. You got 2 guys a little bit off to the right and the left, and 2 guys all the way off on the right and the left, which I'm doing here, right? I got 2 guys here on the right, 2 guys here on the left, and 1 guy in the center. That's a cello quintet. It sounds more physical. And of course, I also have a really short reverb which is modeling the early reflections of whatever space this hypothetical song is in. And this also, I'm also doing this with a few other layers here. Like this is a different like simulated chamber ensemble. The flute, a viola, a soprano sax, a double bass, and an alto trombone. I'm not panning the tracks here. I'm using a utility to change the balance, but I'm still doing the same thing, where half of them are off to the left, half of them are off to the right, and one of them is in the center. In this case, I think the viola is in the center. So yeah, panning's an important thing. At this point in the video, I'm mostly just yapping. I don't really think I have much else to say that's too valuable or that you wouldn't be able to glean from the other stuff that I was talking about with the properties of physical sound. Although I will refer you to a few actual plugins and synths, devices, etc., and resources and documents that I find very useful for this sort of stuff. Yeah, that's it for me. This video was probably really, really long, and maybe not the most fun to watch for someone who wants to watch a quick tutorial and then get on to what they were doing. But if you made it this far into the video, wow, you have amazing endurance and probably have pretty good executive functioning. So congrats on that. That's good for you. Do your laundry. Also, you should probably close YouTube and everything else, all the other applications you have open. Go open Ableton or FL Studio or whatever software you use and make music. You don't need this information. So I'm going to give you like a couple seconds to do that, because please don't get distracted. Do music. Are you gone? Did you leave? Or did you skip ahead in the video, trying to wait for me to say something else? If you're still here, maybe you could subscribe to my YouTube channel. I just turned 18, so I'm trying to make a little bit of money. I do lessons. We can discuss rates. At least at the point of me making this video, I do lessons. You can buy my music on Bandcamp. You can join my Discord server. You can follow me on Twitter, all the platforms. I'd love to have a conversation with you if you want to talk. So yeah, do that.